We good?
We are live, Madam Chair. It's all yours.
Thank you so much. So we'd like to kick off the meeting tonight pursuant to Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022, an act relative to the extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency signed into law on July 16th, 2022. This meeting will be conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance by members of the public will be permitted, but you're welcome to follow along on YouTube. Did we cover everything on there? Can we move on to the next topic?
Yep, they can go to Northborough Remote Meetings on the homepage and click on the link to watch.
Thank you for adding that. I appreciate it.
Sure.
So great to see everybody today. I'm excited that we're kicking off this meeting. I'm just going to walk through the agenda. We'll cover our topics, and if you've got anything to add along the way, let me know. The first topic on our agenda tonight is the acceptance of the December 20th, 2022 meeting minutes. What should I say next?
Is there a motion to approve?
Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
All right, a
Does somebody
second.
second it?
I'll second. No.
Perfect. We've got that on the agenda. Does anybody have any comments, suggestions, or revisions to the minutes that they'd like to have discussed?
No.
So Laura, you'll do a roll call vote, calling each member's name.
Hearing none, I'm going to go through. So Bill Pierce. Chris DeCitis.
Aye.
Janine Callahan.
Aye.
Mark McMenemy.
Aye.
And I, Laura, also vote aye for the minutes. So thank you. We'll move along to the next item. The next item on our agenda is the agenda approval process. So what I was hoping to discuss today was just to have a backup in the event there's any delay. We don't want to have any delays in our meetings being able to be to have our meetings. So in that regard, I was hoping to discuss as a board having Bill Pierce be a second to approve the agenda in preparation for our upcoming meetings. So I just wanted to gather your thoughts on that and see if you would consider approving either myself or Bill to approve agendas in the future so we can make sure there's no delays in our meetings.
Yeah, I mean, because I'm on the planning board, I'm checking my email on a daily basis anyways. So, you know, adding this in doesn't really add that much to what I already do.
Bill's the man with the plan. I trust him.
I'm good.
Perfect.
Okay.
Scott, is there anything else you need from us to make that?
No, we don't need an official motion for it. Just kind of a consensus. Janine, are you okay with that as well?
Yes.
Okay, so the last meeting was postponed because we had an issue getting the agenda posted in time. I'll usually email it out, you know, the day before the 48 hours and give you a heads up that it's coming. So from now on, I'll email it to Laura and Bill both, and either one of you can email back and say it's fine, and then I'll post it right away.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Scott. And thank you, everybody, for your thoughts on that. I appreciate it. So now we get to dive into the exciting topic where we're going to start reviewing the research that has been conducted so far. When I was thinking through how we want to go about this, you know, I guess the ultimate goal is going to be having a committee that's going to be the best suited for the town based on what we've learned from other towns. So I thought maybe we could just go through the towns that we have reviewed. I'll open up the spreadsheet if you'd like, or we could just have an open dialogue around it. We were hoping just to get feedback on the survey process. Thank you so much to Mark for compiling that great spreadsheet for us. We can look at the towns that do have the committees in place. We can discuss any trends that we've noticed in the responses. And then from there, I was thinking we could pick, you know, 8 or 10 different towns that have committees that we think would mirror nicely what we could have in Northborough. And then we could take a look at some more detailed questions that we can ask of those towns. Before I open up the spreadsheet and we start discussing it, does anybody have any thoughts on that process to go forward with? Yeah, Scott.
just wanted to summarize it quickly.
Yeah.
It looks like 59 communities were contacted, 33 do not have traffic safety committees, 24 do. And of the 24, there appears to be a variety of compositions. Just to put it in context, because there's a lot to talk about, 59 communities, and you can probably lump 1 through 33 pretty quickly as don't have them.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. It is one thing we have to keep in mind is, there are really two questions that we're here to answer, right? One is, should Northborough have a traffic safety committee? And then the second one is, okay, if we do, what's the composition and the charter, right? So the fact that 2/3 of the communities in our area don't have them, I think is a little telling. But on the flip side of that, I don't know how many of those. I'd be curious to see, and maybe I'll take a look at this to see how many of them are away from major highways. Because I know of the ones that replied to me, it was all the ones that were on major highways were the ones that had committees.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Some of the conversations I had with people, it was a lot of mixed reviews, and on both sides of the playing field, both brought up some pretty good points, I thought. I don't know if I could save that discussion for when we open it up, but just a quick 2 cents there.
Mark,
Yeah,
Janine? Oh, thank you. Mark,
Scott,
Janine,
you're on
any
mute.
thoughts?
Yeah, there's a good cross section of communities with and without major highways. Foxborough, for example, is on the no list, as is Webster. They both have major highways through them. Auburn is on the no list. So there's a variety. Lunenburg has a major highway through it, so does Shrewsbury. So there's kind of a plethora of Holden is on there. So even though Holden refused to have an exit off a major highway, they have a major highway.
Gotcha. So Scott, I was trying to open the spreadsheet and I can't. It's saying that the sharing is disabled. Are you able to?
Oh yeah,
approve
I'm
it?
sorry. Yes, I'll make you a co-host. Let me do that right now. All right, you should have screen sharing capabilities.
Okay, let's give that a shot again. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Now I can. Yep.
Yep.
Perfect. So yeah, there's definitely a big mix of committees that exist, don't exist. Do we want to go through them one by one? How would you prefer to look through this? Should we cut anything out? Do we want to go through it? And that did not go as planned. Sorry. I don't know where the sheet went. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. Okay. So do we want to just go through, maybe we can go through the first one and see if it makes sense to just go through them line by line? Is that going to take, so the first town that we've got is Acton. And that was one of Bill's towns that does have a traffic safety committee. Did you have any thoughts on your conversations from the town of Acton that were relevant that you'd like to share?
No, Acton was pretty succinct in their responses. So I think a lot of it was, here's where the information is, go ahead out and take a look. Of all the ones that I got responses back, Littleton was really, seemed a little bit more willing to open up and give us much more information than we were asking.
Perfect. So what was the feedback from Littleton on?
That it was very useful, and that it was useful not only for the highways, but for the local road systems as well.
Perfect. Was there any other feedback either from Littleton or any of the other towns that you had spoken to?
No, that was pretty much it.
Perfect.
Bill, with Littleton, did they say kind of what, did that committee make decisions, or was it just, they were there for some recommendations and that went to the town engineer or DPW for, a final approval or anything?
Yeah, they both were advisory committees. So they both advised the DPW, and I believe Littleton also advised the town administrator.
And do they have a committee that's got a makeup of staff and appointed residents, or was it staff?
Yeah,
only?
you can move over. I
yeah.
think it is in there. I don't remember off the top of my head. Yeah, there it is right there.
It's a pretty big one.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. I'm going to keep moving down. If you see anything, in the no's or the yeses as we're going through, feel free to stop me. Chris, we're up to you. Are there any towns that really jumped out that you'd like to highlight to give us some thought on?
I think the three that jumped out, I think actually all of them, I had some pretty good discussions with the representatives. So for West Boylston, I know it's a smaller town than we are, and they're having trouble meeting the quorum every time they have a meeting. So they haven't actually met in a year and a half or so. But so the new DPW director hasn't attended any of those meetings to this point. So there was some information. There's just some limited information there. And again, it is a smaller town than we have, but talking to the DPW director, they do have some similar problems with trucks, traffic, and speed. Talking to Chelmsford director, so theirs is made up of strictly municipal employees that meet on like once a month on Monday mornings, 9 a.m., something like that. Very informal, no agenda really. They go over some requests. I know we have that portal here, so they take a look at that. They go through, they'll answer some of the questions and go through that. There's no public comment. They basically just report to the select board, who distributes that information out. And there was some good points brought up there because, that the DPW director there and the town engineer are the only ones who hold a professional engineer license, throughout the municipality. So really, they're the ones making the final decision and getting the final say, as opposed to a resident who, isn't as well versed in that type of stuff. So that definitely made sense that there could be, it could be tough implementing some of the residents. But then on the flip side, talking to Tewksbury and Westboro, they both thought it was a great idea to have residents involved because, in more of the sense of advisory, they're the ones who are in the weeds of it every day. You see stuff that not everybody sees. So I think, it is interesting on how that committee will, or how a committee being made will kind of give that information to the DPW, because at the end of the day, in this case, Scott would, has the final say, the final write-off. So I know there's been some instances that people were bringing up examples where, someone's like, I want a stop sign here, or, you can't just throw a stop sign anywhere. And I've had people say, in my own personal experience, can we put multiple stoplights here? And it just, for someone to make that decision, it has to go through a whole process. And it's a really big picture thing, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing when you have these conversations and get into the weeds of how towns are really looking at ways to solve, the safer streets. So that's great. Thank you for that feedback.
And a lot of them are dealing with similar problems to us, the large trucks using cut-throughs, residential streets, whatever it may be, high speeds. So I've come to learn that it isn't us. Everybody across the Commonwealth is dealing with it at this point.
I definitely agree with you. I'm sure after these conversations, everyone's got a greater perspective on on this as a larger topic. Thank you for that feedback on those conversations. Janine, did you want to share any feedback on your conversations?
Sure.
Points that stood out?
Yeah, so I mean, there were some of mine that actually do have, they don't necessarily call them traffic safety. They all, they all have specific names. But I did get some really good feedback from some of them. A lot of them they kind of all run the same, I felt, their ultimate goal is all the same, and I think that the only one that was a little bit different to me was Westboro. They started off dealing more with bicycles and pedestrians, and now that the town is growing and getting bigger, and Route 9 and 495, it's kind of turning more into what the other surrounding towns that I talk to are doing. They're more about traffic safety versus just, pedestrians walking and bicycles, biking around town. But again, I think that the towns that I was speaking to do have major highways. And I think that goes back to what we were saying. If they have major highways, they tend to do something like this. So again, I think that the gist that I got is that they feel that traffic and safety works for their towns because of the growing population in this area and the major highways turning more major than what they were maybe 5-10 years ago.
Sure, Scott.
Just a quick outline. So of the 7 communities Janine calls, 2 had traffic safety committees. 1 has a Facebook group and the other 4 did not. I believe that's the breakdown. Yes, that's the breakdown.
Well, 2 of them, 1, I know they have a traffic and safety. They never got back to me. I tried multiple times and they just didn't have time. And actually it was funny because one of the towns that I did call was intrigued and wants to learn more about it because he's their safety officer in town. So he said he was going to be following up with me in the next few months to see what direction we headed in, and maybe they can learn something.
Thank you as well. So Jen, I'm thinking for folks that are not here tonight, I'll just invite them to send any, blurbs or thoughts. We've all read the notes that they provided, but I'm finding that the actual descriptions that we're getting today are really just giving me a better understanding of what we've all come to as far as the information that we've gathered. I'll go last. So Mark, I'll turn it over to you now. If you wanted to go through some of your towns and any just general feedback on what you learned.
Yeah, I can be pretty quick because only Hudson and Clinton had internal traffic committees, which is just basically the police chief, fire chief, DPW, that would get together once a month, almost, for a lunch or a breakfast club type of thing. Really just internal, dealing with complaints that they'd had and figuring out how to deal with it. So I went into some other towns, and I think Bolton, I'm going to mention, because they were a small town, but their committee was interesting. It was 4 citizens at large. They almost operated their bi-weekly meeting like a podcast, where they would sit and talk about traffic in town. And once a quarter, they'd have the police chief come in and be interviewed, and then the DPW guy, every couple of months, and like that. So it was kind of entertaining. So it was different. So figured they're worth mentioning.
That's great. I'll have to check that out.
There's a link on the sheet to one of their meetings with the police chief.
From their did you have a chance to listen to their podcast? Did they give suggestions and ideas for how to improve the safety?
Well, the one that they included was was just the interview with the police chief. So he talked about what could and couldn't be done with the particular open items that they had at the time.
Oh my gosh, that's probably so
It
helpful
was
because-
actually a meeting. It was a Zoom meeting, but it just had the format like a podcast with 4 people having an open discussion, and they had a couple other attendees in the room with concerns.
Mark, is it a town committee? 'Cause-
They've got
Like-
they post an agenda. They've got but they don't have anybody from the town on the committee, so it's just 4 people at large, and then they report to one of the other committees. So maybe a subcommittee that lets them get away with that. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I think it's helpful. Anything that we can do to help the community better understand the routing process for when they share information. I think having these different ways to communicate with the residents is really helpful. And I love podcasts, so that's right up my alley for being able to keep track of things. Was there any other feedback on the towns that you reviewed?
Well, I'd say, the first, what we have originally 7. I mean, other
Yep.
than Clinton and Hudson that we knew about, nobody else had anything.
Okay, gotcha.
That sounds similar. Sorry to interrupt. I didn't get the chance to talk to Sherburne, but they not monthly, but every so often they'll meet with the police and DPW, and they'll go over high crash locations. And they'll kind of look at a map. It's almost like someone will put it into GIS, and they can see the hot spots in town where there's multiple crash clusters.
Okay. I think I'm going to go back up and then I'll just give you some thoughts on my conversations that I had. So I had some interesting conversations. So one feedback that came from Sudbury, they have a staff-only safety committee. And one of the challenges that the Sudbury police chief shared was that they don't have budget and they don't have a great, they're having some trouble with sending their recommendations to the selectmen. And they said that really having a strong partnership with the selectmen, really following the suggestions is something that would be more helpful. I think there's just that challenge. He said he's also fielding a lot of requests from residents who don't understand that you can't put stop signs in, all the places that the residents feel that they'd like them to be. He shared that, all the requirements for putting all these different traffic safety measures is just, it seems like there may be some confusion amongst the community about what can and can't be done. And then just that the selectmen really supporting these initiatives. I heard that from several towns. Grafton, by comparison, I spoke to the police chief there, and they do have a traffic safety committee there. And he loves their committee. He said that they've helped alleviate some of the pressure on staff by helping field some of the requests from the community and then helping staff prioritize where they want to focus their attention. He's got a great relationship with their selectmen. And I think there's some good overlaps with Northborough from folks from Grafton that also came up. So that was helpful. The other town that I talked to that I really was intrigued by was Winchester. Winchester has an 11-member traffic safety committee, and they have a lot of engagement. Theirs includes both pedestrians, bicycles. They meet on a monthly basis. They've been around for, I think, 10 years, and they've really accomplished a lot, working with the town, working with the selectmen, and just really helping that need for their town. I'm trying to think of the other, and then the other ones were primarily staff run versus, committee run. So that's my, I guess, 2 cents based on my conversations with the different towns that I spoke to. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts?
Well, if I can mention I was coming across a lot of the towns that were doing the same efforts as far as traffic control, sidewalks and pedestrians, bike paths and stuff like that, doing that under their Complete Streets Committee. So very similar committee with a similar agenda. And I know we've got an effort in town too. So that's done traffic surveys and stuff on Facebook. So there is a lot of overlap there. So I'm not quite sure whether having a traffic committee is redundant or if we could help that other committee or, what the best way to go with this is.
Just to clarify, the Northborough does not have a complete streets committee. We've submitted our prioritization plan to Mass DOT under the tier 2 of the Complete Streets program. We're expecting approval of that soon, which would allow funding to be available for tier 3, which is construction. Design services needed for Complete Streets projects are not funded by Complete Streets. There would have to be another funding mechanism identified for that. So all the survey and engineering services are funded elsewhere outside of Complete Streets.
Yeah, I don't know if it would make sense to have a separate committee competing for the same funds or with the same action items. So I don't know. You would know better than I do about how that has worked.
Though we don't have a Complete Streets committee, so there
Well,
is no.
I saw the presentation that I think the Master Planning Committee did on Complete Streets.
Oh, Lori, the planning director, and myself, as well as our consultant Wood and Curran, did a couple Complete Streets presentations to the Board of Selectmen. We also had just a regular public input session in preparation of the prioritization plan. So we don't have a committee. A committee hasn't been established for Complete Streets. Some towns have them, some towns don't.
Yeah.
One of the driving factors of Complete Streets projects are funding that's available. Money that becomes available quickly may rise things on the prioritization list. So it's a bit of a changing environment as far as funding projects.
No, I definitely appreciate you bringing that up and just commenting on the potential overlaps. My hope with what we're doing is that we can help, really alleviate some of the pressure on traffic safety one way or another and help alleviate the pressure on staff. So it is close in the terms of the number of committees that do and don't have them. So I was thinking as a next step, we'd probably want to take some of the committees, we could pick some of those towns, either the ones that have committees that are fully formed that we want to take a closer look at. I think it's really close to try and make a decision about whether we should or shouldn't have one based on the results so far and just needing more data. But what would be the thoughts on maybe picking, 5 to 10 towns to really take a closer look at and just really taking more specific looks about what we could do in Northborough. And then looking at some additional questions. Based on what we know so far, does that sound like something that we could look closer at based on what we know so far?
Yeah, I think so. I think there was a couple interesting ones. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Scott. No,
I
you still
can't hear you.
No, I'm sorry, I'm good. I was just looking at the spreadsheet, trying to find good comps. If the decision is to go forward and evaluating other communities with committees, then it's probably appropriate to find the best comps for the town, not necessarily, committee composition, like what similar mileage, similar population. Laura, you identified the towns with and without major highways. So.
It sounded like Grafton was a pretty intriguing one, and I think Mark, you had one. Was it?
Yeah,
Sorry.
Bolton was interesting. It's not a very comparable town though, because
Right.
they have 495 and they have a ramp, but other than that, it's a very small town.
Yeah, that is a small town.
I think that Westboro would probably be a good town just because they do have one and they're so close to Northborough that, we could really, it's a lot of the same information or, details, the town itself, the highways that are running through each town. We share some, Route 9 might be interesting to use that one.
One
anyone-
thing to consider. I'm sorry, Chris, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, did anyone get the chance to build in Southborough ever get back to you?
I'm sorry?
Southborough? Anyone get the chance to talk to them or?
I think we already determined that Southborough did not have one. I always thought you would have that on your initial list.
One thing to think about when you're thinking about comps, when you look at the size of a community, it's often indicative somewhat of their budget and their staffing. So when you look at Westboro, they're about 6,000 people more than us. They have over 40 staff in DPW, and their budget, I think, is about 120 million. And on the flip side, you've got, Bolton, that's like 7,500 people, and their budget's probably half of ours. So it's hard to find good comps. I guess the committee's, weighing on what's critical and isn't is important.
So yeah, if I were to pick two of the towns that I would like to take a closer look at, I would definitely say Winchester and Grafton are two of the ones that I'd like to take a closer look at. And then I've heard Westboro as the other one, Bolton. Were there any other ones that I missed that you'd like to take a closer look at?
Littleton.
Littleton would be a good one. Winchester might be tough just because of how close it is in relation to downtown Boston. It just, I don't know. It's definitely a little different. I feel we definitely could we could go a little further and see what they have. I think that's just something to consider. Is it's very close to the downtown Boston. The heart of our the Commonwealth.
Yeah,
Yeah,
one thing that I did, see looking and talking to all of these towns is no matter what they call themselves or what the size of the town is, or even the committee itself, if they did have one, they're all talking about the same things, lights, signs, speeding, crosswalks, and that, because I did have different towns that had all different, sizes of population or whatever, but I don't know, to me, they still were talking about, the same big topics that every other town, small or big. I don't know, I thought that was interesting.
Ashland looks like a good comp. I know Jen isn't here, but similar resident size. They have a committee. It's a similar feel of a community. And Janine, one of my reasons of commenting about the size is just it was reminding me when I think Bill had said that he talked to a committee that has no budget, or Mark did. A large community with 22,000 people may have funds available for traffic safety implementation, or a department that has 48 people may have staff resources for it, as opposed to Bolton, which really doesn't, because they're really small. So, but Ashland looks very similar as well.
Did anybody happen to find any towns that do have budget for traffic safety? Everybody that I spoke to, there was no budget at all, had to go through the selectmen or the appointing board. Is that across the board for the rest of you as well?
That's what I got as well, because anything advisory is not going to have a budget.
True. I guess that probably plays more to the staff, the staff-led traffic safety committees that make sense. But even those ones didn't have budgets from the conversations I had.
In my notes, it said Westboro did, but he wasn't sure of what it was. I talked to Joe. I'm gonna butcher his last name, Bocadoro. But he wasn't sure of what that was. It looks like, Janine, you spoke with a couple other people too.
Yeah, so they don't have a budget, but occasionally she said that they would go to town meeting to request funds if there was a specific project that they wanted to work on.
In order to hire a consultant in that case, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What I've seen in other municipalities is a operating budget line item under either public works or planning. And it's for exactly that, Chris, for, consultants or studies to be done, or, maybe throw it to CMRPC for some of their services. Generally not, buy a stoplight or purchase a, couple signs. That's DPW operating, or, enforcement, that's PD. But consultants and studies is what I've seen elsewhere.
Yeah, there was, I think it was Chelmsford. They actually have a very small on-call contract with a consultant just for, small tasks that might come down the pipeline for them to just quickly get it in and out. With something that she had mentioned to consider if going forward with this.
Got it. So we've got, I'd like to keep Winchester. It's up to you. I'd like to keep Winchester, and just because it's really thorough and very established, it's been around for over 10 years. I
Yeah.
realize that it's not a perfect match, but if the rest of you don't want to include it, I'm happy to pull it off. But they just have some really great resources. They've got a nice website. It was just very chock full of information.
I think we keep it on. It's just something to consider.
Yeah, no, I
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Proximity.
Nope, that's a
agree.
great. And then I'd like to invite, Jen and Mitch to both, if they've got towns that they like to add in to take a deeper discussion, maybe we can let them pick those out. We'll just give them the criteria that we're going to look at for the second round. There's no doubt that traffic safety is something that's critically important to all of us. And just finding the best way to navigate this is really, I guess, the ultimate goal, whichever route we end up going. Before we wrap up the review of the data collected, is there any last thoughts that anybody would like to share? Sounds good. Do I need to take any votes here, or can I just move on to the next agenda item, Scott?
Just move on, and we can, next meeting, reconvene with Mitch and Jen, or even they can just send an email over to you and I saying,
Yeah.
these are 2 towns that I thought was of interest, and then I can distribute. So far I got Grafton, Westboro, Littleton, and Winchester. Grab 2 more, maybe 3. That way everybody has one. There's 7 members, and then decide what criterion you want to go forward with further investigation.
Sounds good. So that's an excellent lead into our next topic, which is the discussion of next steps. In that, I was thinking we could just really take a closer look at the type of questions that we'd like to ask in our second round of discussions. So I've crafted a few. If anybody's got any thoughts before I dive into that, did you want me to just read through what I put together for thoughts, and then we can pick it apart? Okay.
You could probably stop sharing the screen if you like also.
Thank you. Okay, perfect. So a lot of these, I think we've already got the information as far as, just is there a budget, which I think it's really important just to figure how the funding mechanism works. So if you don't have a budget, how does that approval process work when projects are decided? What's the routing process for requests? When your town does have traffic safety inquiries, like what does that path look like for the town? I should pause after each statement so that I can see if there's any feedback on them. So I'll go back to the budget question. Does that make sense? Do you have anything to add or change on that? Does that question make, does it seem like it would be a beneficial one?
Yeah, I would even expand it a little bit further and say, even if they don't have a budget, what are some of the, recommendation methods that they use?
Great. Okay. The next one I have is, what is the routing process for requests? So if a resident's got a question, like how does it flow? Is it like a website online? How does that path look? Anything to add there? Thoughts? Sounds good. The voting member makeup and how, do they come from like just the regular, does it come from planning, select board, staff, residents, and just understand their voting in a more specific, how they vote, how that, advice is passed on to the board that, in this case, I guess the selectmen, or if it goes to staff, how that looks. Any thoughts there?
Makes sense.
Perfect. And committee makeup, it rolls into that. Another question that I thought is mission statement. I'm sure you saw some mission statements in the different towns that you were looking at. It might be helpful to just see the specific mission of the different committees that we're going to take a closer look at. Anything else on the mission statement? Okay. And then how long has it been established? I know some are relatively new, some are old, but I think the ones that have been around for longer periods of time, there might be some good information there. And then that was that. So those were the criteria that I was thinking, but I'd love to just open it up and see if there are any other questions, based on your research that you think would be helpful. Hi, Scott. Yep.
Just to follow up on the last question, it may be interesting to find out if the committee has evolved. If it's been around for 10 years and it started out as all staff and now the citizens or vice versa, is it elected, is it appointed officials only, that type of evolution.
Yep. And conversely, like a new one, maybe there's a community that's, dealing with quick changes similar to what Northborough is, and maybe that'll be good advice there. But ultimately, the goal is just to really get deeper on the information that we're going to gather. Are there any other thoughts about, criteria that you think would be helpful to review?
If they don't have a mission statement,
Yeah.
officially, it may be worthwhile to just find out their charge,
Yeah.
ped, bike, vehicle, transit, what are they there for?
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. And if they're listed in the town charter, that might be good to include as well. Perfect. Is there any other, points to add there before we move on? Sounds good.
Yeah.
Awesome. The next topic we had was our future meeting dates. I will make sure. Is there a date? And how does this time work? Is it better to go to 7? What works best for you guys?
This time, 5:30 works for me, if it works for everybody else.
Yeah,
Yep.
5:30 works for me.
Perfect.
Scott, is it easier for you to schedule if it's, Monday or Tuesday?
Tuesday's easier just because all the staff is here. It's, when you're prepping for a meeting and nobody's around and something comes up, it's a little challenging to, juggle them both. Public Works, things always come up. But I can do Mondays as well. I know Mitch will be backed up on some Mondays with the Board of Selectmen. Bill, when are the planning board meetings? Are they Tuesdays?
It's first and third Tuesday.
Okay, all right.
So
Our last meeting, or our first one was, I thought that was
December 22nd?
Yeah, that was a Thursday, right?
But Tuesday works for me if that works
Okay.
for the rest of the team, and we can work around the planning board schedule. I think a month out would be a fair amount of time to give us to gather this next round of information, give Mitch and Jen enough time to respond.
We're looking
And
at
then Scott, yep,
the 28th, February 28th, it sounds like.
that works. Does that work for the rest of you?
works for me.
Yeah, works for me.
I'll be 50-50 at that point.
Is there something that we could adjust? Is it the day or?
It's just that, so my wife is due March 1st, so anything around that time is gonna be really hard.
Get your priorities in order, Chris.
No, I understand. I don't think there's no real time or day during that week that's going to be more beneficial to you.
No, the next month is basically being on standby.
Well, I'm so happy for you. That's awesome.
Thank you.
But yeah, why don't we pencil that date in for our next meeting? 5:30 is fine with me if that is good with the rest. Does that fit in with the rest of your schedules?
Yeah.
Awesome. That sounds great. Is there any other business that anybody wanted to bring up before the board today?
I don't think so.
No,
Sounds good.
I'll send a Zoom in. I'll send an email out confirming with Jen and Mitch that the 28th works for them, and then I'll send out the Zoom invite, and we'll be good going forward.
Perfect. And then Scott, I'll work with you and we'll set that final list up, and then we'll send along the different towns to the people. Mark, from the spreadsheet, you did a great job compiling all the contact information, so it should be really easy for everybody to communicate with the person that fielded the first round of calls. And then we'll look forward to reconvening in February. I think that was all I wanted to cover today. Chris, are you gonna say?
Yeah, sorry, if I may add, I'm gonna reach out to Holliston. I see them on the list here. It's pretty similar size town, and they do have one just to see what they have.
Absolutely. That sounds good. Well, I've enjoyed this conversation today. I thank you all for bringing such great information back and taking the time to really learn. It's been a great experience so far. With no other business, would somebody like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Would somebody like to second that?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Or we can stay here all night. I'm sure I'll have lots of material. Okay, we need to do a roll call vote. Bill Pierce,
Aye.
Chris DeCitas,
Aye.
Janine Callahan,
Aye.
Mark McMenemy.
Aye.
Laura, I'm also